The decisions being made right now will shape who controls the consumer, the inventory, and the future of business. While the real estate industry fights over commissions, private listings, portals, relevance, there's a lot of things going on that really, love it or hate it, we're not sitting on the sidelines.
And if you look at American history, when industries consolidate, consolidation begets more consolidation.
We know all real estate agents want to acquire clients consistently so that they can grow their business and income for that great lifestyle. This broadcast brings you the best and top people in the industry to support that quest. This is Dave Fanale, and I'm here to bring you the Real Estate Skill Builder broadcast, Real Estate Talk TGIF, brought to you by Real Estate Skill Builder and Aligned, your premier real estate solution. Welcome back, everybody. Here, look, it's really simple. This is episode 418 of Real Estate Talk TGIF, and a lot of CEOs are trying to protect what was. My guest today is trying hard to build what's next, the evolution of real estate with full transparency for the agents and the consumer alike. While the real estate industry fights over commissions, private listings, portals, relevance, there's a lot of things going on that really, love it or hate it, we're not sitting on the sidelines. Leo's not sitting on the sidelines. The reality is really simple. The decisions being made right now will shape who controls the consumer, the inventory, and the future of business. And I don't think we want to shape the consumer. So with skipping all the corporate BS that we can talk about today, let's go in and have a great conversation with, really simply, I never met this anymore, the man, the myth, the legend, Leo Pareja, CEO of eXp. Thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure. Great to be here again.
Awesome. And you were on once before, as you said. So talk to me about, Leo, let's get right into it. Time is limited. Talk to me about the evolution of real estate over the last few years and where it sits today with, Real and Remax, eXp and Next Home, and whatever else is coming. Talk to me about the evolution and where we're at today.
Yeah, that's a great question that I feel like I've been talking quite a bit. So in January of this year, I was on the Inman Big Stage, and I said something that got pinned to the top of the Inman website for 6 months, I think. And what I said was, if you look at American history, when industries consolidate, consolidation begets more consolidation. So it started with Compass it actually started by Stone Point investing in Keller Williams. That was a private equity taking a meaningful position in one of the most iconic real estate companies in the United States, followed by Compass acquiring Anywhere. So the combined CIH holding company, Compass International Holdings, owns 9 brands. And I don't know that people appreciate the size of that. It's 340,000 agents across their global footprints, 210,000 agents in the United States. Then Real Remax merger was announced. So that has not closed, but it was announced. And like 6 days later, we actually announced the closing of Next Home, right? So that had been worked on since September. So it was almost like 7 months leading up to it. The timing was very close. But what you're seeing is there's a shift that's happened where real estate used to be hyper-local, which, by the way, it still is, but the ownership structures used to be hyper-local. And so you had companies like Keller Williams and Remax that built these very dominant national brands. And brand is a big differentiator from brokerage, right? So if you look at Keller Williams, their number one franchisee is a good friend of mine, Smokey Garrett. He's got 4,000 agents across 5 states. But out of 136,000 agents, only 4,000 reside in one single entity, right? We were basically the first of our kind as a national company with a national footprint, and same with Compass. And so both of us are publicly traded. We have access to capital. We have liquidity. We have cash flow. So the world is changing in the sense where you have a single company that has the size, scale, and scope, and come with it the technical ability. So for example, I like to create evergreen content, but we're going to be very specific with the timing here. This is May of 2026, right? And a lot of headlines happened this week.
Yes.
We did a syndication deal with Google, right? Via House Canary. And so we're in a pilot that's live in about 6 markets. And if you type into Google right now, homes for sale in Miami, Austin, Cleveland, Chicago, the greater New York City area like Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, we're probably one of the only brokerages that's coming up on the top of the search bar. And The only reason we were able to pull off the pilot is because of our size and scope. So between all of our active listings, between eXp and NextHome, we have close to 80,000 active listings. Prior to these national platforms existing, that was just not an option. And a perfect example of how that scale and scope plays out is there's a pretty big clash right now between Zillow and MRED, the Chicagoland's biggest MLS, and their feed was cut off at midnight on Tuesday, and Wednesday morning they lost all their listings, but we were uninterrupted because we have a technical team that's big. We have a data team that's sophisticated, and we had plumbed all of our data to Zillow directly months before in the event that any MLS ever did that. And by the way, that came from 2 years ago. There was a small MLS provider called Rapatoni that was hacked and held
Yep.
hostage by some cyber criminals. And for 3 weeks, 12 markets that we operate in, we could not update a listing into the MLS. And so back then, Dave, I made the decision we'll never be put again in that situation. So just as an example, if every MLS in the country went dark tomorrow and literally there was no way to log in, agents at eXp have an app on their phone via Zenlist, and they could do direct listing input, and we could syndicate that directly to Google, Zillow, Homes, Realtor, Redford. We can send it wherever we want, right? And so in the shifting landscape, the size and scale of the enterprise, the technical ability of the enterprise, I think MLSs in 2026 are having an existential moment of what is that they actually do. And I think the technology vendors, like all the Cotality products and Matrix and Paragon, I think they lost sight of who they work for, right? They don't work for
I
the
agree with
MLS.
that.
They work for the brokerages. And so I think everyone's trying to figure out, who's on first, which way the world is going, where the puck is going, any analogy you want. But it's an interesting moment. And for a lot of organizations, I think it's an existential moment. We were built for this. Like, this is what we do. I am 0%
Exactly.
stressed out about it. I'm actually see it as an opportunity because there's some small to mid-sized players that are just saying, hey, it is abundantly clear to me I need to pick a larger platform to attach myself to.
Yeah, I look at that and I look at how important this is to the consumer, right? And to me, that's always been the most important thing as a broker owner, as an agent, as a coach. It's always been, what does the consumer want? How does the consumer look at it? And I look at the minuscule things which are not so minuscule in our business, where just to give you an example of I think the consumer is misrepresented today is through negotiations not being what they used to be. Like, we all set on this highest and best thing when there's multiple offers. I don't think that's fair to the consumer. But what we're talking about is different than that. That's just another point. Being fair to the consumer is giving access to their listing to everyone. Is that correct?
That's our stance, right? Again, everyone has the right to have their own stance, but I was an actual licensed agent, so I believe in
Right.
the fiduciary responsibility that we're supposed to have. And so it's important to me that we actually do that and represent them correctly and make sure that to me, maximum exposure is maximum exposure. I sold my parents' house in Belize in another country recently before they moved over to live in South Florida. And it took me 4 years and 4 different brokerages, because basically outside of a system like ours, you have to make a little website and hope that it appears on Google and hope the potential buyer calls you directly to show the property yourself. So I think we take for granted how amazing the system is in the United States. And I think we're all about to find out what a fractured system looks and feels like.
So so when we look at the growth in our business, when we look at Compass taking over Anywhere, and we look at Real and Remax coming together, how does that change the landscape? How does that change the business that us as, okay, I'm going to use a phrase I don't like to put to myself, a legacy agent, someone who's been in the business a very long time. How does that change for us? How does that change for the newer agent?
So, like, I think there's a very interesting thing that you need to separate, and I would apply this one statement to all of life. I think we overemphasize 99% of the things that happen to us, right? And I'm a father to young children, so it's like super aware to me. My 11-year-old will have a meltdown over the smallest little thing right now. And again, at different ages, it's like when they're 3, it's because they, at 2, it's because they dropped their pacifier on the floor. At 11 now, it's where she's beefing with another girl in class, right? And I would invite anybody to think about any moment in their life that was pretty traumatic. And again, let's leave out like abuse and like really horrible things, but like most things that kept you up at night. I think about the first business confrontations I had, like the first time someone sued me or threatened me, or like the first big financial loss, like I lost $50,000 on a transaction. I lost $100,000 on a transaction. When you look back in the rearview mirror, it's like you can't even remember exactly what was keeping you up at night, right? So I invite people to always remember it's not that serious. And so why I'm saying that to the question you just asked me is most agents don't need to worry about any of this stuff. It's like, are you making your contacts? Are you creating content? Are you staying in touch with the people who refer you? But like so much of everything is noise, right? Like it's my job to make sure that it is actually just noise for you guys. The best compliment an agent gave me the other day at an event was, I feel so safe here. And I said, explain what you mean by that. And she said, whenever I see a headline, you've accustomed me to like give it an hour and Leo will tell us what the plan is, right? Or maybe it's a day. I try to make it even preemptively, like if there's an announcement, it's like, by the way, this doesn't affect you guys. We got to handle like, we made our own forums, we made our own rules. But at the end of the day, you guys are helping consumers find their way home. It happens, a handful of times in their entire life. It's highly infrequent, very expensive, and highly emotional. So I would encourage everyone to say, like, none of it matters if you truly own your database and you truly own your relationships and you're a market expert in your service area. Almost everything is always noise.
So with everything being noise and making the calls and building the relationships very, very important. This may sound like a strange question. What's more important, the relationship or value?
I don't think it's an and. I think it's it's an or, it's an and, right? So first of all, the value you deliver is on the business model you create, right? And by the way, I very early on figured out I didn't want to do billboards like cold lead gen to then go compete fiercely with 4 other agents, right? The business I built as a practitioner was deep and relational, and like there was almost no way for you to compete with me because once I locked it down, I delivered so much value. So I worked with developers and builders and investors where, I was involved in underwriting the property before they bought them. I was involved in picking the colors. I was involved in so much of the process. And then I was responsible for a net execution price. Like if I said it was going to sell for X and it did sell for 10% less than X, they were holding me accountable, and we were going to have different conversations of like, okay, where do we screw up? Was that us? Was the market? Did the market move? Because we can't do that over and over again because they're not in the non-for-profit business.
Right.
By the way, Dave, that's not good or bad. That just is. That's the business I chose based on my personality, my skill sets, and the way my brain's wired. Like for me to either cold prospect or go on 4 appointments a day and win 2, like I don't find that fun. And some of my best, dearest friends in the business, like a Chris Heller, is just like the world's greatest at it. And I admire it, but I'm not wired like that. And so I would say that fundamentally everyone succeeds with close relationships, but the definition of value is almost in the eye of the beholder, right? Like the real estate analogy for that, when someone's like, every agent listening to this has had a call with, talk to someone at a cocktail party and say, hey, call me if you have a good deal. Well, you should never, ever accept that without a follow-up question. It's like, what's the definition of a good deal, right? Because a good deal could be 65% ARV minus repair costs. Good deal could be, hey, 5% discount if it's in this geography that I can walk to it from my house. I have no idea what a good deal means to you. There was a gentleman who owned a very large commercial cleaning business with government contracts in the DC area that I grew up in. I sold him probably 16, 17 houses that I would not have touched with a 10-foot pole. He specifically wanted them in one subdivision. He would pay full market price. He would then tear them down, and he would build these homes that to me made no financial sense. And then he'd rent them out. And like on a cash basis between the lot and the single family and the construction, what he would charge and rent, it was like a 4% cash on cash return. And it never made sense. But I asked him, I said, why are you doing that? He goes, I'm substantially older than my wife. His first wife passed away and he remarried. He had some health issues. He said, this is my will plan. My wife collects the rents and their driving distance to the house. They're brand new, so there's no deferred maintenance cost. There were higher end rentals, so they had pretty low maintenance tenants. And he goes, I don't care about the yield. This is an asset transfer strategy where I fully don't believe that anyone in my family can run the government contracting business. It's pretty complex and long, like the day I die, that business dies with me. And this is my way of training my family to replace my income. And they're very involved in the real estate business. They were there when we designed the houses. They rented the houses. I make them collect the rent. And God forbid, if I pass away in the next 5, 10, 15 years, they're not going to skip a beat. My family's going to be taken care of and the business will get liquidated. So I would have never defined that as a deal. And again, the value I delivered was understanding his needs, right? So you also, it's not your job to tell someone what a good deal is or what house they should live in. It's to listen and consult and deliver value.
Taking everything you just said into perspective and context with what's going on in our business, having to do with private listings, et cetera, where's the value and the difference in relationship building there and the transparency? Because as I said, and as we've said before, there's something to look at when it comes to, the fiduciary responsibility, the responsibility of the agent to do the best they can for their client. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think that's almost an internal one that you need to have with yourself. So I tell everyone, market the property how you would market if you owned it, or if your mother owned it, or if your cousin owned it, right? Mm-hmm. And that should be the full stop way. It's in the good book. It's the golden rule. Treat others as you would want them to treat you. I believe if I were selling a property I owned, I'd want it exposed to as many people in the open market as possible. Period. Full stop. I'll give you a very personal story. I had a hard money lending business, and we lent money on a property that was way atypical. Like in a neighborhood, it was a oversized lot, and it had a tiny little slab on grade foundation. It was a 2-1. It made no sense. Everything else was like a new build. And I lent 50 cents on the dollar, and we ended up taking it back. And literally the comps, 5 of us looked at it. We weren't sure if it was 300 or 400. It was literally that 25% swing. Because I owned it, we ended up saying, hey, I'm going to list it for 149. And we put in the MLS. The lender requires 15 days on market. And we made sure it was on every single website that we could find. We ended up with 48 properties or 48 offers. And we took not the highest, not the lowest, the one with the terms we liked. And we ended up that we had an offer all the way to 400, and we had offers all the way. And we ended up taking an offer at 346, right? Because that one was no contingencies, all cash, close in 7 days, no questions asked, because there was a crack in the foundation. There was the $400,000 offer was 203K, 97% financing, 60 days to close. And we just said, look, for the net execution, we're good on this deal. Like, I think I lent 150. So it was like, we were going to make plenty of money anyway. And we were just ready to move on. Right. So, I fundamentally believe the goal of capitalism is to remove friction from the process, most amount of money, shortest amount of time, least amount of friction. Right. And so if that statement is true, which is what I believe, and I think it's what you believe, Dave, I don't see how adding friction to the process benefits the consumer.
It doesn't. There's no way it can. What about the agent though? I mean, agents, real estate agents now are when we talk about other companies, some of them feel handcuffed. Some of them feel that I've got to go here because this is what's happening. Do you feel that that'll be a reality in the next 3 to 5 years? That'll be a reality now.
Well, I think it's becoming a reality for different reasons, right? So I think you're asking me of like, I got to go there because they have the inventory. I think people are probably feeling it even about us. And like, I want the scale, the scope, the tooling for what it costs to be there, right? So like if I had to sum up what my job is to make sure that there's always an asymmetric amount of value for cost. So meaning for what you pay me to be here, I need to make sure I'm giving you a multiple, like by 3 or 4 or 5x amount of value that you could go recreate on your own. Like it is my job to make sure that a team, if they were to go independent, they would be not saving money. Right? That they're like, oh, wow, if I go independent, this will cost me double what I pay to be here. And I think going back to what you asked me, like that's a version of definition of value, right? So I can give you an example as an agent. When I would meet with a seller, and especially if it was like an older dated property, I would actually show up with 3 settlement statements. They said, listen, if you want to be gone by Friday, here's a cash offer from 3 investors and you don't have to do anything. We can go on market with kind of, as is, where is, but, little curb appeal, like spend 20 grand and, 15 grand and
Right.
we will get this. And so this number you net X and this one you net Y, or here's a full scope, like let's do $70,000 worth of work. It'll take 6 months. You'll get a 2-to-1 return, meaning if you spend the 70,000 and get you an extra 140,000, right? So a net of 70,000. And by the way, I have the contractors lined up. They'll pull permits and they'll carry the paper, and I have the financing lined up for you, right? The value I brought to that transaction was moving from, hey, I'm a salesperson to more of I'm a consultant, and the property is what it is, and you actually get the outcome you want based on time, money, effort, right? Friction. Because renovating a house means you have to move out of it. That's a lot of friction. So friction's an important word and kind of my definition of value. So when you look at the company, their ability to create the tooling and the scope and scale does vary quite a bit. And so I don't think inventory is a superpower. I think especially with AI doing what it's doing, I think the data will become more ubiquitous. I think people can put up paywalls and an AI chatbot's going to be able to log in on behalf of the consumer and put them all in a cart, and they can work with their agent on seeing the property. So we're in super interesting times. Well, like one of the reasons I wanted to do something with Google was because I believe that the Gemini LLM will be one of the most powerful ones, just because they have so much data. So I want to make sure all your listings are indexed there.
So I want to shift a little bit to the agent and talk a little bit about that for now. So we've got so many agents, and I know that you guys recently in your conversation over the last week with Riz Media talked a little bit about the shrinking of the industry as far as numbers of agents, right? And I've always thought that there was a place for agents that let's talk about older agents. So I'm going to look at age, and I'm going to look at experience, and I'll look at people that just don't quite want to be in a cloud brokerage, or they want to be virtual, or they want this, or they want that. But what we're seeing is the speed of this business go very fast as time goes on. A lot of people don't want to be there. I kind of like to call it a phrase that everybody uses from time to time called the messy middle. Is there a place? Will there be a place? Can there become a place for agents that are, they're doing their 6 to 10 transactions a year, but they're not really as, savvy in AI, or they are, and they want that legacy brokers. They want that legacy style, right? And I've seen it for a very long time. I had a brokerage for 21 years like that, and decided to move on from it because what I created, I didn't like after a while. Is there a place for that in what we're talking about in the evolution over the next 18 months, 5 years, whatever?
Yeah, agents and brokerages in our industry has been very resilient. I think the demise of our industry has been grossly exaggerated for the 24 years I've been in the business, right? And it comes from a bunch of reasons, but I think people always find their place. So I will tell you that I believe if we execute on our plan, we end up with 10% of the industry. We're at 4%. So it's not like unrealistic for me to say that statement. But that means 90% would never be with us at any given point, right? And so the American ethos is radically independent. If you look at the lending business, I think last year, Rocky was 8.6% of every transaction in America. And then it kind of dropped off precipitously from there. Unlike Canada, where 4 banks control 80% of the mortgage originations. We're just, as Americans, it's part of our ethos to be very independent. So I think the small independent boutiques will always exist. I think it'll be a big portion of the long tail. But I do believe, because of size, scale, and capital, you are going to continue to see this concentration into, call it, maybe 4 or 5 entities that control 40, 50, 60% of the business in both agent count and transaction count. And again, scale does give advantages, but it also then kind of commoditizes and homogenizes it. So, the entities that aren't being as thoughtful about it, I believe we are, kind of create this, no differentiation across opportunities. And so the cloud is not for everybody. I am a strong believer of it. And I think it's going to depend as to what you're looking for. But I would promise, Dave, that a lot's going to change. And the folks that are comfortable with the change are the winners, and also the ones who just kind of continue to focus on relationships and creating value for those relationships will disproportionately win.
Really quickly, one more. I've heard you said that this is the year of the headline, and then over the next 18 to 24 months, you've also said that so much will change, but so much will stay the same. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Yeah.
So my prediction in Q4 of 2025 was, they said, "What do you think about 2026?" And I said, "It'll be the year of the headline." And I get to be right on this one. Like, we've had the craziest headlines, but what I said was nothing will change in 2025. But everything will change in 3 to 5 years. So, so far, I'm pretty right on this one, right? I did feel going into 2026 that there was that I could feel the tension and obviously I have an unfair advantage because I see everything. I get a call about everything in play. So the amount of calls, I was like, 2026 is going to be a hold my beer year. And so far it's only May, right? Like, we got the back half of the year too. And by the way, like, the amount of change that's happened will probably provoke more change. And so the part of where I said, but nothing's going to change, was for 2026. I do believe in 3 to 5 years, the industry could look radically different because of all the headlines, right? Because look, when any company merges with another company, it's 18 months, 24 months of integration and figuring stuff out. And so you can assume that everyone's going to hit their stride in a couple of years in what it looks like. And I'm not that good at predicting what it's going to be, but I'm predicting that it's going to be radically different.
Leo, I want to thank you so much for being on. I know we're up on time, and can't forget the hat. And last but not least, man, if there's anything I can do to help you, I always ask this question before the hat: is how can I help you grow the business, grow your business? I think
that one's easy. Keep doing what you're doing. We're aligned as partners, and I appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much, Leo. God bless you and your family. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.